All right. Hello, everyone. We are going to go ahead and get things underway today. My name is Mrs. Edwards, and I am the career counselor with both Atlee and Patrick Henry High Schools. We also have Mrs. Corbin on today's visit. Ms. Corbin?
Hi, I'm Mrs. Corbin, and I'm the career counselor at Hanover High School and HCPS High School, formerly Lee Davis High School.
And again, we just really appreciate you joining our college visit series today. This is our first one for the week, so we're excited to get things underway. We're really fortunate to be hearing from Mr. Josh Price from George Mason University. And with that, we are going to go ahead and hand it over to Mr. Price to get us started on today. Thanks so much for being here with us, Mr. Price.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Ms. Edwards and Ms. Corbin. And also thank you guys for tuning in and watching this video if you're not able to attend right now. This is George Mason University. My name is Josh Price. I'm an admissions counselor for you at George Mason University. I am here to recruit. I am here to talk to you about George Mason and help you along the process. So I'm very excited to discuss George Mason as always. The first thing that I like to point out on why I love to talk about George Mason is because I myself was a Mason student. I studied communications and conflict analysis and resolution. I graduated recently from George Mason. And so just kind of my major and what I attached to that, my minor in conflict analysis and resolution, says a lot about the multidisciplinary nature of George Mason. So that's one thing to note in accordance to who I am and why I like to talk about George Mason. So before we get started, one thing that I like to do is pretty much maybe talk about what it is that I'm going to discuss, so that way you have an expectation of some things throughout the presentation. So one thing that I'm going to talk about is, what is Mason like today in terms of its size, in terms of the demographics, its diversity, in terms of its location, because we are in close proximity to DC. That's one point that I like to make. And I also like to talk about some of the other initiatives that we have at the institution, such as the study abroad experiences, such as the Honors College, and even the program that we have for students, which is the clubs and organizations. And then I'll kind of dive a little bit into the application process. So to kind of move a little bit forward, let me just kind of talk to you about what is Mason like today, present time. So we are the largest public research institution in Virginia. We have an R1 designation status, which means we have some of the same level of research as other institutions across the board. Our research is very prominent, and it is founded in all of our academic programs. We have an office dedicated to research. So that's something that you'd be able to engage with alongside fellow students, yourself, and even fellow faculty members at George Mason. We really value research. Our research is something that really allows us to make a contribution to society, and it allows us to really, really engage in culture and really, make significant innovations in a lot of different ways. So that's one thing to note about our research. In terms of our size, we are the largest public institution in Virginia. We have over 38,000 students. So yes, we are big. We have over 25,000 undergraduates. And as a matter of fact, it was just announced a few weeks ago that we're now sitting at over 38,000. And what that really tells students about us is the opportunities that exist, the connections that you can have, and the relationships that you can build from that. So that's something in terms of our size. We are also the youngest law school in the top 50. So what that means is we have one of the prominent law schools in the country, lots of different programs. Even if you're coming in as a freshman student, there is that pathway to do so. Relatively, students will do accelerated to master's program, where they'll do maybe a bachelor's within a 3-year period that takes them on a track to the law school at George Mason. So there is that pathway to participate in our law program if that's something that interests you. And then we also have the second largest residential campus in Virginia, over 6,200 beds. So you can stay here all week. We have traditional style housing, community style housing, apartment style housing. So there's that flexibility to what you would like to live, the living standards that you'd like to pretty much have on our college campus. All freshmen are required to live on campus their first year unless you live within a certain distance from Mason. So that's one thing to note. But one thing to know about our housing is that it's healthy, it's good, it's safe, and it's something that is accessible because of that convenience towards classes, dining areas, and other specific amenities across the campus. So that's one thing to note. Our housing is very community driven. That's how you're going to be able to create relationships. And that's something that we really advocate for. And I say that because I was a Mason student and I enjoyed the relationships and the standards that I lived by when I was at George Mason. So that's one thing to note. And one of the favorite things I like to talk about is the diversity. We're represented by 50 states and over 149 different countries. So here's my part. At George Mason, we define diversity as similarities and differences amongst people. And with that, there is that inclusivity. 40% of our student body is made up of people of color. And so what that's going to mean is coming to George Mason, you'll be able to create relationships with different people, but you'll also be able to learn from different people because of people coming from all different places, socioeconomic statuses, intellects, types of personalities, even disabilities. There's lots to engage with, and there's lots to learn from that. For me, I remember particularly going to a diverse environment in New York City for the first time, and then how that inspired me to choose a university like George Mason and the amount of learning that I've gotten from that. Right now, that's a passion of mine to this day, because I came from a small town, Southern Virginia, where it's not as diverse as it might be up here, but it's something that I really, really enjoyed even to this day and going forward. So that's one thing that I love to talk about. We have different heritage months dedicated to Hispanics, Black History Months. There's international weeks that we do. There is even Native American initiatives that are put on by many of our student organizations. We have a lot of different ethnicity-based organizations, first generation college student organizations. So lots of different ways to engage with relative to your interest. And I love talking about that, and I could talk about that for a long time. But if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me on that. Okay, so one thing to note, and I always love to kind of put it this way in terms of our academics, I don't always talk about the more popular programs or what's not popular, because at George Mason, they're all pretty popular. We have over 80 majors, over 200 minors and concentrations, and over 55 plus accelerated master's programs. So there's a lot to choose from in terms of tailoring the majors, the concentrations, and the minors towards what it is that you're interested in, okay? In each of our fields, there is the research, there is the experts in those fields, there is the relationships that you build, and most prominently, there are tons of different job and internship opportunities across the spectrum, especially considering we're in this DC metro area. You're actually able to search out different opportunities by the help of the academic advisors and the career services office, and by the networking that you do. But one of the things is that all of our programs are very innovative. They're very intellectually stimulating, meaning you're able to create relationships with your professors and have conversations, especially noticing that our average class sizes is 25, at pretty much between the 25 to 35 students. So there are those relationships that you create no matter which academic program that you're in. For me, I studied communications. That was pretty much my only major for a semester. Then I had an academic advisor that talked to me about the conflict analysis and resolution program. And when I got into the program, before I got into the program, I was like, maybe just conflict. But I got into the program and I really realized how in-depth conflict was and how in-depth the research that I could do. And that pretty much says a lot about the explorational part of George Mason. My mission for me specifically was to learn, explore, and discover. And that's still my mission to this day, because as a result of George Mason, that's something that has really fueled my passion to do that. So that's a little bit about the academic programs. If you have questions about that, feel free to reach out to me specifically. Another thing that I like to note, just as I've mentioned, is that we are located 15 miles outside of DC. So all you would need to do, in addition to other transportation options, such as just driving your own car or taking a bus or taking an Uber, you literally can get on a free Mason shuttle with your Mason ID if you live on campus, or if you're a Mason student. The Mason shuttle will take you to the metro station, which is in Vienna, Virginia, and it's only a few minutes away. And that metro takes you right into DC, and it's roughly a 15 to 20 minute ride. So there is a convenient way to get to other different cities that surround the area, because we're relatively a urban / suburban area. So there's lots of different attractions, restaurants to go to, different jobs to have, countless. I can't even name, just one, because there's just countless opportunities. And I just want you to know the big picture, because if I say just one job is going to be a very limited picture. So I'm just going to say that there's countless opportunities for you to pursue in terms of the job and internship opportunities. So that's one thing to know. But we are close to DC, and that gives you an opportunity to go out and explore. So that's one thing to note there. Okay. And let me just kind of stick on that part about jobs. We do have career services at our institution as well. So this is a particular office on campus dedicated to helping students with their next steps in terms of their internships and their careers, and their professional development in terms of internships, resume building, cover letters specifically. So you have those resources there to help you along the way. They even do put on job fairs every single semester that brings over 600 jobs per year at average, and even a website dedicated to you even looking up different job opportunities with over 14,000 jobs. So lots of opportunities to pursue in terms of jobs. And that's also something that I can talk more about. So if you have any questions, feel free to let me know. Now, here's the other cool thing. So I didn't mention experiential learning as it was on the previous slide. So the experiential learning is something that gets students in the classroom and also outside of the classroom. So one thing to note about experiential learning is that internships, study abroad experiences, the projects that you do, and the research. So one thing to note here, specifically in terms of the study abroad experiences, because I spent a little bit of time on internships, is that we have over 200 programs in over 75 different countries on 6 continents. As a matter of fact, we have been to Antarctica before, but maybe or maybe not, that wasn't a study abroad experience specifically. So I guess you can say we've been on 7 continents. So we have tons of different opportunities for you to pursue in terms of that. The benefits is that you are receiving college credit. You are using some of your financial aid that you have for a particular semester at Mason. And as a matter of fact, since you are Virginia residents, you can even use you can pretty much be paying the same money that you would be paying on our Fairfax campus, and even less in addition to your financial aid, if you do participate in the study abroad experience for some of our programs. So that is why we definitely encourage our students to really take a look into that, because there's tons of different advantages towards that. And the other big thing is that you get to explore. What does it look like outside of the country? What is this particular culture like? How does it affect you? How does it affect our world? So there's lots of different opportunities that exist there. And let's say you're ready to go ahead and study abroad your first year. We call it our Global Gateway program. And this is a program where you're taking a class your first semester, you're already in the program, and it's preparing you for the study abroad experience within the Global Gateway program your second semester. So that's one thing. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me. But the main thing that you would want to know is they come in all different shapes and sizes. So you can go for a week long, a break long, a year long, a semester long. I know students who have been for maybe a semester and decided, I want to go a little bit more. I want to stay. Of course, when you're on vacation and you have a hotel that you reserve, you really can't do that. You have to go back home. But with study abroad, there's that flexibility. So yes, definitely look into that. So yeah, that's a little bit about our study abroad. But shifting the environment just a bit, I want to kind of talk about the application process. So there are two pieces of advice that I can give to you in terms of going along that way. Review and ask questions. Review and ask questions and use your resources. I'll maybe put in a number 3. So you have your counselors at your school, you have your teachers, because yes, they've been in college too. You have me. You're always welcome to reach out to me. So ensure that you are asking the questions that they come up. I don't care how simple they are. I still love them as much as the good question that somebody says. So just make sure that you are asking questions. But overall, ensure that you're filling out your applications, looking at the deadlines, the requirements, so that you have all the material that you need when it comes to applying to institutions. So for us, that's my piece of advice that I can give there. But there are two ways that you can apply to George Mason. There is the common application, which is beneficial for some because it allows them to apply to different colleges. And then there's the Mason application. It does not matter which one you choose. It's all going to come to the same system that we have. So it's all up to you what it is that you would like to pretty much do your application on. Now, one thing to think about, because you might be thinking, well, what do you guys look for? What do you guys, who gets accepted and who doesn't? Well, the good thing to answer that is that you're more than just a number and you're more than just potentially one piece of paper. We know that. So we take a holistic approach to review. So we're thinking about the transcripts that you put in front of us, the standardized test scores that you put in front of us. We're test optional. Stop right there. We are a test optional school. So that means you have the benefit of submitting your test scores and you have the benefit of not submitting your test scores. Whatever you feel is beneficial for you in the application process is one thing to note. We have been test optional even before the pandemic. So that's one thing to pretty much understand in terms of the test scores. But that's something that you can submit at your discretion. Another key point is the essay, which is strongly recommended, and the letters of recommendation, which is another strongly recommended effort as well. One from a counselor and one from a teacher. But the main thing that you need to know is that the holistic approach pretty much means that you're putting everything in front of us that you would like for us to see, with the transcript being the one that's required to help us make that informed decision about you. So that's one thing to know. And take the opportunity in your essay to talk about why it is that you want to come to college, potentially, what it is that you are interested in, and also some of the background information, maybe some things that impacted you, that influenced you. Take this as an opportunity to share your story, more so than an opportunity to try to impress me. I want to see, I can really tell that, and I can see when it's really coming from somebody's heart and somebody who really, really, really wants to come, pretty much wants to go to college and wants to come to an institution where they can learn. So just make sure you take the opportunity and have fun. So that's one thing to be aware of in that way as well. And another key point is the Honors College. So this is a very enriching program. It's a challenging program. It's a very supportive program. It allows you to get more out of your education because it replaces the Mason core requirements or general education requirements, if I might say. So this is a more intellectual program. It's very community driven. If that's something that you're interested in, just know that all you have to do is check it off on the application, submit a required essay that's there, a resume, and letters of recommendation, which are also required as well. So that's one thing to note. There's no specific GPA or SAT requirement that exists there. We take a holistic approach to review if you're interested in that. And then the College of Visual Performing Arts, usually there's an audition or portfolio review if you're interested in a thing like theater, dance, or music, or computer game design. Though there are usually extra steps that you would need to take in pursuit of those programs. But those plus signs that you see are for students who are interested in a program like the Honors College or the College of Visual Performing Arts. So that's one thing to know. Okay. Now, not what we look for, but typically the average of people who've come that we've admitted within the past year, I would say. And that lands between that 3.3 to 3.9 GPA weighted. So that's one thing to note if you're kind of curious about what the GPAs that we look for. We take a holistic approach to review because we know that you're more than a number. But we also want to make sure that you're equipped and ready for the programs and the classes that we have at George Mason. If you're thinking SAT scores, if you submit them, we look for 1,100 to a 1,220 of an SAT score on the critical reading and the math section. That's a super score, so it's not going to be out of 2,400 specifically. So be sure to be aware of that if you do submit them. And the ACT is between the 23 to 29 composite scores. So that's one thing to know about test scores. But yes, we are test optional, but most of all, we take a holistic approach to review there. In terms of the Vogino School of Engineering, students who are interested in our engineering programs, you too are still going to be test optional, even though we have required SAT scores, specifically the math section in the past. So that's one thing to note, but we'll place a lot more emphasis on the math courses that you've taken in your high schools. And if you don't get into the engineering program specifically, that's fine. You could be undeclared engineering, and that will get you prepared for that program specifically if you're still admissible. Now, all you would need to know is that the November 1st is the deadline. If you want to apply for early action, so you want to apply a little bit early, it's non-binding, so you don't have to make a decision immediately. You have pretty much till maybe the springtime to do so. That's also the deadline if you want to get consideration for the Honors College, and it's also the deadline for consideration for merit-based, free money. So it varies. There's not a specific amount. It just varies per particular student circumstance, but we also want to make sure that we're simultaneously awarding students for the academic achievements that they've done as well. So that's one thing to note about November 1st. November 1st, remember that. And then there's January 15th if you need a little bit more time to make that decision. So that's pretty much what you would need to know in terms of dates. But one thing to always know in addition is January 15th being not necessarily a deadline, but the date we would love to have your FAFSAs in by, because it gives our financial aid office a lot more time to spend on your situation and get those things out to you so you're able to make your decisions too as well. So that's one thing to note, which is very, very important. Okay, and the main thing is to stay in touch. Stay in touch. You're able to reach out to me via email. My email is jprice27@gmu.edu. Just know that specifically. But the main thing to always know is to stay engaged, stay in touch, follow us on social media specifically, and just know that we're there for you in terms of any questions that you have to have. And one thing I forgot to mention is that we do have lots of student organizations and clubs, 500. So you can do what you want to do here at George Mason. I think that's a good little small piece to know. Okay. So yeah, that's a little bit about the student life. But in terms of the presentation, if you ever have any questions, feel free to reach out to me. All right. Thank you guys so much for tuning in.